Welcome to the Kickass Couples Podcast. This is the place where we help committed couples who want to level up their marriage experience newfound clarity, hope, and confidence. We're Matthew and Kim, co-hosts and husband and wife.
In 26 years together, we've seen a lot and never thought it could be as good as it is right now. We're here to help you successfully navigate the messy, dirty, and wonderful world of marriage.
We believe all couples deserve and are capable of experiencing an extraordinary and fulfilling marriage. And each week, we're bringing you life lessons from real-life successful couples to help you grow and strengthen your relationship.
We'll get started right after this message.
If you want to learn how to experience the best, most fulfilling year of your marriage, we invite you to order Matthew's new book, Kickass Husband, Winning at Life, Marriage, and Sex. You can get it at Amazon.com or visit Matthew's website, www.matthewphoffman.com. Again, that's Amazon.com or www.matthewphoffman.com. And now, back to the show.
Welcome back to the Kickass Couples Podcast. In this episode, we bring you this kick-ass husband and wife, Kyle and Ariel Tresch, who recommitted themselves to their marriage, and by doing so, both their relationship and their businesses have prospered. Kyle and Ariel are husband and wife digital marketing consultants. They've helped build multiple, thriving, seven-figure businesses over the last 10 years. After helping companies scale their teams and revenue, this once happy couple suddenly found themselves in a dark place in their personal relationship. The everyday stresses of business had begun to take a toll on their relationship. Thankfully, Kyle and Ariel chose to fight for their marriage. In doing so, they pioneered a brand new approach to doing life and business in a way that has allowed their relationship to flourish and their businesses to skyrocket. Today, they are founders of a coaching company called Couplepreneurs, where Kyle and Ariel equip other entrepreneur couples with proven strategies they need to rapidly scale their businesses to seven figures and beyond, all while going on more date nights than ever before. Welcome back, everybody, to the Kick-Ass Couples Podcast. We are excited to have a prince and princess with us today, so aptly named as we were previously talking on our podcast today. We want to welcome Kyle and Ariel Tresch. We're so glad to have you guys with us today.
We're so glad to be here, especially with that introduction. Watch out.
Well, you got to own your awesomeness, right? That's right. What we were just talking about. We like to start off with one question. I'd like to hear from both of you. And Ariel, if you don't mind starting, I'm going to look to you first. I'd like to know, what do you think makes you and Kyle a kick-ass couple?
So I would say that one of the things that we really, I guess, own about our relationship is the fact that we have a really high degree of appreciation for each other. Like, we are consistently acknowledging each other, telling each other like that we love each other on a really consistent basis, to the point it almost gets a little gross. Like, we're constantly giving like words of affirmation and appreciation to the other person. And I think that has been one of the things that has stood out the most to other people around us, as well as to us, even seeing other relationships and things like that and looking at ours. That's one thing that I'm most proud of in our relationship.
That's good. And then for me, I would say along the same lines of that, we approach everything that we do as a unit. So whether we are growing businesses, or we are going to the gym, or we are developing ourselves both personally or professionally, we do it as a unit. We do it together. We set goals together. We achieve goals together. And everything in our life, whether it's long range plans to what we're going to eat tomorrow, everything is planned out to include the other person.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, unity is actually one of our pillars, and we feel it's very essential in a relationship. So, way to go.
Thanks.
Thank you. We get a gold star.
Exactly. We believe that our history, it plays a really important role in what we bring to a relationship. So I always say we have a little bit of grandpa in our bones. And I'd love to know from you, Kyle, what did love look like when you were growing up? How was it expressed in your family when you were a child?
Wow. Great question. And because I think we ourselves have seen the effects of how love was portrayed at a young age to how it actually carries over to now. So put simply, I was very blessed to be born in a house where divorce wasn't an option. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there wasn't a lot of chaos and a lot of fights, if I could be honest. So I love my parents. I love the ethics and values that they instilled in me. But a long time when I was growing up, I saw a lot of fights, a lot of craziness, a lot of chaos, a lot of insulting, a lot of resentment that was built up between the two of them. So when I approached the opportunity to marry Ariel, I knew obviously I wanted to do something different. I wanted to approach our relationship from a day-to-day basis, from a standard of appreciation, not letting resentment build up, not letting unforgiveness tear away the intimacy of a relationship. And I think it's Tony Robbins that says you have to thank your parents for both the good and the bad things. So honestly, I'm grateful for every experience I've had.
Sure, we do bring a lot of that, what we learned and what was modeled to us to the next relationship. So I appreciate you saying that you really realize that is something you did not want to bring into your relationship, and you learned from it. I imagine that was difficult though, because when that's modeled for us, we just sort of automatically portray those things because that's just what we learned. Did you have any difficulties in when you were first married, bringing some of those traits to the relationship?
That's a great question, because I also have to say too that I did learn a lot of good things as well from my parents. Like, for example, my dad is a very servant-hearted person who does look to care, and he's very loyal to my mom. And I would say I carried that piece, but also some of the challenges that I had early on was not reacting from an emotional place when certain things would go wrong. Or the bigger thing is not blaming the other person anytime something goes wrong. Now, I'm not saying I'm perfect on this, just for everybody that's watching. I still screw up at this sometimes, but when I catch myself like stressed out and then looking to blame my wife for some of the chaos that goes on in our life, I have to stop myself and say, no, that's just either old programming or just me reacting in a very immature way to the point where I don't do that as much. So that I would say that was the earlier challenges early on, was just not putting any sort of blame towards her.
Sure.
Ariel, I'd love to ask you the same question. How was love modeled for you when you were a child and when you were, growing up as a young adult?
Yeah. So like he said, I like this question, and it's rather different from Kyle. So I actually did come from a household that was quite honestly full of divorce. My mom had divorced my dad, and then they got remarried, and they divorced again. And then she married my stepfather. So there was a lot of separation that happened. And even now, like growing up, that is something that I look back on, and it's something that has definitely shaped the way in which I viewed relationships. I always tell Kyle, or I always tell anybody, even when we got married, I was never the little girl who wanted to get married. I was always like, I'm going to do it on my own. I don't need no man. I don't need anything like that. And it was actually interesting because based on what I saw, it was a lot of separation, a lot of division in our household. And again, I love my parents, love my family. I love that, like he said, the values that they instilled in me. And it definitely, I would say, has given me a lot of strengths as well. But seeing the division and the fighting and the resentment, and specifically, my mom struggled with a lot of forgiveness. She held grudges very strongly. And that was something that in our relationship, that was probably the biggest thing that I struggled with, is when we first got together, any sort of conflict was like the world was ending. Our relationship was over. Like if there was any sort of like conflict, or even like we never fought very much, but even when we had like some tension, I was like, he's leaving me. It's over. I did something wrong. It was very like abandonment focused. Like he was going to leave and I did something wrong. And therefore I was going to put up a wall and completely like stonewall him. And so that was the biggest thing that I experienced in our relationship to begin with. And I think the biggest strength that it gave me, though, is being able to recognize that I guess behavior in people, because I could see it so clearly in others, to where it was kind of blind to me at first, until in our relationship, that was something that Kyle actually highlighted to me in a positive way. He was like, I just want to let you know, like whenever we have a conflict, like it's not over. Like there's nothing wrong with our relationship. There's nothing wrong with us. This is just normal. This is just what happens. And that took me a really long time to actually view conflict that way and actually be accustomed to, dealing with our issues versus running and hiding from it.
Yeah, it was funny in our early stages, seeing how the differences of our backgrounds actually play into our marriage. My family, they would like fight and then like forgive the night of. It would be like crazy fireworks, and then towards the end of the day, be like, all right, so where are we going to eat?
Right.
And then for Ariel, it was like they would fight and their family would just not talk to each other for weeks on end.
Yeah.
So that difference of conflict resolution was very interesting in our relationship, because we would have like a tussle or whatever, like a disagreement, and I'd be over it in like 30 minutes. And then Ariel would be over in the corner worrying that like, oh, it's all over, that's it. Sure. Kyle's leaving. And we had to work through that for sure. On both ends, for sure.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, so that kind of leads naturally into our 3 C's, which are commitment, communication, and conflict resolution. And Kyle, I'd like to start with you, and I'd like to hear from you. What does commitment look like in your relationship with Ariel?
Oh, what a great question.
Commitment. Like these questions.
Yeah, I do too. It's like you guys have done this before. So
just a few times.
Just a couple of times, yeah. So what commitment looks like to me is a day-to-day choice to put Ariel first. Now, here's where I'm going to disagree with the majority of relationship advice out there. A lot of people just denigrate marriage to it's a decision, it's an obligation, it's a choice. And that's all that they say. And they think that makes them high and mighty. Where I disagree with them slightly on that is, yes, it is a choice. However, it's not just a commitment to stay married and tough it out like it's this obligatory contract. A commitment is a commitment to stay in love, is to bring up the emotional feelings of gratitude, appreciation, and love while I'm committed to doing what I can on a day-to-day basis to serve her and to consider her best needs in mind. So that's what I would say.
That's beautiful. You nailed that.
Nailed it.
Sounds like do you have that on a cue card somewhere, Kyle? Or, no, okay, it's from the hip. Ariel, you didn't read that, did he, Ariel? Okay.
No, this is just something we're passionate about. Yes. Like even with our business Couplepreneurs, like one of the things we want to stand out against is this idea that marriage is either like one extreme of marriage is you just do whatever feels good, and if it doesn't feel good, like it doesn't serve you, cut it out. Like that's obviously wrong. And then on the other end, it's like marriage is a commitment, it's a decision, it's a contract, it's hard, blah, 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 blah. We're like, no, like both of those sides are extreme. So we want to set an example, especially for the younger generation, that you can have a happy, thriving relationship that is both committed as well as feeling good in the process.
Absolutely. Great concept. Ariel, how would you add to that? What would you say about what does commitment look like to you in your number one relationship?
I really have nothing to add. And like you said, this is something that we talk about very frequently, like even amongst each other. Like we always view it, like he said, as love is not an obligation. It's a commitment to coming back to the feeling of love. And that's the biggest thing. And it does take a level of self-awareness. It does take a level of like personal responsibility, of course. So it's not always the easiest thing. But for us, like we look at it as, we are on the same team. And so when we are committed to each other, like, again, it's not just a contractual agreement. It's not just a piece of paper that says, hey, we're married and we're going to stick it out. It's actually making sure that we love each other, but we actually like each other too. So we have to always come back to that feeling of love, even when, in that moment, there's a little bit of tension. There's a little bit of, friction. We have to figure out what, remind ourselves, what is it that I actually like about this person as a whole? Not just in this exact moment right now when I'm feeling a certain way, but why do I actually love this person? What am I grateful for? And looking at that relationship as a whole, and actually, again, coming back to the feeling of love.
Yeah, I like what you say, because that, love is, you have to like somebody before you can love them. And you got to like spending. And that really refers to, I think, what we call the friendship system, right? Yeah. And the friendship system, if that's strong and mature and really well developed, I like to be with this person. I want to do things with this person. And I love them because of all these things. The love is a result of that. It's not I love them, but oh man, I really don't like them. And you have to remember that in the midst of something that you say, well, I may not like this behavior right now, but it doesn't mean I don't like them or love them, because that's a much broader concept made up of our whole body of work. So I appreciate you bringing that up, and that's important.
Yeah. Can I add something to that very quickly?
Sure.
Yeah.
So this might be a little detached from commitment, but just speaking about the concept of, finding your way back to the feeling of love and what do I actually like and love about this person. We have a concept, and I forget who initially used this term, but I heard it once from a life coach of some sort, but they said, when you look at your relationship, think in terms of ecosystems. And I come from like a scientific background, so this really spoke to me. But when I look at Kyle, like, again, some of the things like the little quirks that, can get a little irritating, when you're in a relationship, a committed relationship, I always view it as ecosystems, right? So even though Kyle is a very creative person, his brain is sometimes like moving 1,000,000 miles an hour. And sometimes he's like running past me in terms of like when he's talking and thinking, and he's 1,000,000 miles ahead of me and I'm just trying to catch up. But sometimes I can get frustrated, like, hey, we're having a conversation, like, don't just, speed ahead. But then I look at it and I'm like, but the way his brain works allows him to also move very quickly in business. It allows him to see a variety of different, options in the world and bring them all together. And it allows him to have the creativity and the gifts that he has. So I have to look at, he might have some, quote unquote weaknesses that I might view as weaknesses in that moment. But usually on the flip side, there's a strength that I also love at the same time. So I like to think in terms of ecosystems like that.
Yeah. So an application to anybody who's watching or listening, if there's something about your spouse that just drives you nuts, most of the time there is an equal and opposite strength that is associated with that trait that is driving you nuts.
Sure.
And when
No
we
doubt.
look at the associated strength of that trait, it actually allows us to appreciate our spouse, even with the things they do that drive us nuts.
That's awesome. You're looking for the good in each other, for the positive in each other. We all have negatives. I mean, let's face it.
Of course.
Yeah.
We're all human. We're all going to make mistakes and we're all going to irritate each other. But if we look at people and really look to see the good and, look and be grateful for the good as well, you just see this whole different person.
It outweighs it. Yeah. And another thing I'll share with you guys, you brought that up. I love the also kind of when we're finding fault in something or you're thinking, man, I have a problem with this. It usually in somebody else, it usually means that it's something you struggle with yourself, right? Because you're going, I can't stand, it really drives me crazy when you do and say this. Well, it's usually a comment about us that we have to reflect back and go, well, wait a minute, and why is that issue so important to me? And why is that a trigger for me? And what do I need to dig and understand about myself? Because it's not about, hey, you got to change something so I'm okay with it. It's usually I've got to change my perception of what it is or understand it and accept you one way or the other, regardless of that specific behavior. And I think you guys brought that out in your example.
Definitely. The second of our 3 C's is communication. And boy, is that a big one. Effective communication with our spouse is critical in a relationship. And I'd love to hear from you, Ariel. How do you communicate with Kyle? How do you make time to communicate with Kyle?
Yeah. So I can come at this from 2 ways. So first of all, in terms of, you just said making time to communicate. One of the things that I would say kind of struggled with in the beginning of our relationship is, we're both business owners. And when we first, we've been business owners the majority of our relationship. And in the beginning, like when we first got married, business kind of took over our life. And so what ended up happening, especially on my part, is I have a tendency sometimes to get like borderline obsessive with things. Like I can get like so focused on something that I can forget everything else around me. And when in the beginning of our marriage, actually, I was so focused on my business that I had kind of put our relationship and the communication that we had on the back burner. So it was not until Kyle made me aware of this. He was like, hey, I kind of, in a sense, he felt like he was competing with the business for my attention. So with that in mind, communication has been something that we have had to actively make time for, because when you're doing a lot of things, anybody who's listening, if you have a family, if you have kids, if you have a business, if you have, jobs, you're doing things all day long. Nobody is not busy in a sense. But to actually be able to make time to communicate is something that we have to remind ourselves of consistently, because otherwise it's very easy to let other things in our life take over. So that would be the first thing in terms of making time for it. Now, going back to communication for me, like with my family, communication was not modeled the best for me, again, especially because conflict was something to be avoided. So whenever I was feeling a certain way, the first thing I would do is I would just shut it down, and I wouldn't bring it to his attention. And I really had to learn how to actually communicate and share what I was feeling, share my vulnerability, share the things that were on my mind, without viewing it as something that was going to, lead to further conflict. So communication is something that we've had to work both from a time perspective, but also from a for me, how to actually share what I'm feeling and not feel like it's going to be quote unquote wrong in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. How about you, Kyle? Do you have anything to add to your communication style with each other?
Well, I will say it definitely has improved over the years. With Ariel not necessarily being so prone to sharing her feelings, I found it almost like my responsibility to kind of like give her the permission to let that out and know that she can express herself and feel completely safe, like she's not going to be judged or ridiculed or criticized or anything like that. So there's that one piece. Then on a more practical sense, because we are couplepreneurs, like that's our whole thing, right? We work with other entrepreneur couples, helping them scale their businesses. We've actually had to take a lot of what we learned in growing businesses and apply that towards our marital communications. What that looks like is, if you've been a part of a corporation or a business, that there are weekly meetings, there are daily check-ins, there are quarterly staff meetings. You have these like regimented meetings. Yep. Why? Because the better the communication is amongst an organization, the better that organization is going to perform. Marriage is the same way. So what we actually did to really improve ourselves from going from having a lot of tension early on in our marriage to just now like communicating better than ever is we put in very regimented, very strict times where every single morning we check in with each other. Yeah. Like, what are the priorities for the day? What are the meetings today? Where do I need to be? Where do you need to be? When are we both going to the gym? When are we both on separate meetings? Yeah, and that way,
when are we going to if we're off doing our separate things, when are we going to come together is something that we have to make sure we dial in.
Yeah. And basically, so we do that once a day. We have weekly strategy meetings where we look at all of the things that we're doing in business, all of the things our clients are doing. And essentially what this does is it allows us to stay on the same page. Yeah. And for everybody watching, if you don't have something like this in place, we would highly suggest it, because when you don't have communication, the lack of communication creates room for future resentment. And that future resentment builds because expectations are not being fulfilled by the other person. Why? Because those expectations weren't communicated in the first place. So we're very, we take it very, very seriously. Yeah. And I think as a result, instituting these different practices, we've seen a huge lift in our quality of our relationship.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that with our listeners. I love hearing your intentionality about the way that you communicate with each other. And I think enough couples don't do that. They don't build that time into the relationship to plan and to be very intentional about spending time together and effectively communicating.
You mean, Kyle, you can't read Ariel's mind?
I'm getting very close.
Pretty close.
It's funny because, what's interesting and you talked about those gaps, right? When there's gaps of communication, we all have a bad habit of creating a story. Yes. Well, she didn't say something about that. She must think this. She must feel that. And if she feels that, well, that makes me feel this way. So we create these subtexts that don't exist because the communication isn't occurring. And I love what you said about that, and being intentional about the communication is critical. And it sounds like you guys have some great tools in place. And we've heard a lot of couples. We interviewed a couple on the west coast of Florida, and they have clients as well. And they talked about, we have to have the same practices from our business. What makes a good business, what makes a good relationship, and vice versa. If it works well over here, how come you don't use it over there as well? It's not, it doesn't change value and relatedness. So I love hearing that from both of you. And that kind of leads into our third C, which is conflict resolution. And I'd love to hear, Ariel, from you. How do you guys handle conflict when there is disagreement? What do you do, and what have you learned in your relationship of how to navigate those waters?
Yeah. So the first thing is, we say we don't fight, and that's not to say like, oh, we're perfect. It's just to say that fight has a very negative connotation. It has a very like heated, like angry connotation to me. So we usually like to just say we have heated debates, and our heated debates are something that, again, for me, I've had to learn to actually open up when it comes to conflict. And with that in mind, I think we've just learned over the years what the different ways that we each view conflict. Again, for me, it was the world is ending. For Kyle, it's he's over it in 30 minutes. And I think now, because we understand that about each other, I have been much better at being able to like not hold grudges, get over things a lot faster. And I think on the other hand, he now knows that sometimes I just need time to process. So like if we do have a heated debate, it's, at that very moment, I sometimes can't speak. And it's not to say like, it's not like, hey, I don't want to share my feelings with you right now. It's like, I need a moment to process what's happening. And then I can actually share what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking. And that's when we can actually move through it.
Yeah. I would also say on my end too, with conflict resolution, just to piggyback on what Ariel was saying about the debates, what we have learned to do is to disagree with each other's intellectual points without ever attacking each other's integrity or personhood. What I mean by that is, let's say, this actually might shock a lot of people who are listening. Ariel eats a vegan diet and I do not. And yet we totally respect the differences in one another. And that sounds crazy. And I use that example because that's an area where we might disagree on, some subtle nuances. But yet when we go to dinner, she'll get a vegan diet, a vegan meal. I'll get like chicken or steak or whatever. And we respect the differences in one another without saying, you're wrong, you're an idiot, you're stupid, you're like, we don't do that. And I think a lot of what we learned, especially in conflict resolution that you'll see displayed all over social media, is just a bunch of people pointing fingers at other people and calling names. And we make it a point to never do that in our marriage.
When it comes to creating a kick-ass marriage, do you ever wonder what you could be doing better? Have you ever thought how helpful it would be to be a part of a like-minded community of other imperfect couples who want to level up in their number one relationship? Come visit Kickass Couples Nation, where you can talk with people just like you who are looking for ways to invest in and increase their joy, commitment, and fulfillment in their most important human relationship. You'll have access to a team of licensed marriage therapists, coaches, articles, podcasts, live webinars, and more. Just visit MatthewPHoffman.com so you can learn more about a community that's ready to help you level up. That's MatthewPHoffman.com so you can become of the growing Kickass Couples Nation right now.
Yeah.
You got a good laugh out of us because, Kyle, in this relationship, I'm a vegan.
And I'm not.
And my wife is not.
No kidding.
Yeah.
And you guys are the first couple that it was like that with.
Yeah. Nice. A little bit country, a little bit rock and roll.
Exactly.
But yeah. Like, but what's so funny is we used to be in the restaurant business. So, and I'm a cook. My wife would call me a chef. I say a cook. But, she's eaten a lot more vegan things because I make them taste good.
Yeah.
I know how to do that. And then, but she'll say, man, I'm craving a steak. And I have no problem making it. It's not a fear or loathing thing. So we figured out that dance quite well. And,
but I would say it was, I was a little critical in the beginning because it was so frustrating for me to try to figure out how to feed him, or if we were going over to a friend's house for dinner, how to explain that to someone. And so I would say that it took me a while to learn how to navigate that.
Mm-hmm.
But
obviously you guys have figured it out.
Yeah,
we figured it out.
It definitely looks like it.
We've been dancing for a while, and we're still having fun dancing. No doubt.
That's awesome.
Well, other than the 3 C's, the first 3 that we believe are really important and most essential in a relationship, we have 11 more pillars. And I would love to hear from you, Kyle, first. Of the 11 pillars, is there one that stands out to you that's really important to you and that resonates most with you?
Just to be a rule breaker, can I pick 2?
Sure, go ahead.
So initially, so we had the opportunity to take the assessment, which anybody watching, if you haven't taken that assessment, it's really, really cool on the Kickass Couples website. It's fantastic. And when we took it, there was one area that I kind of didn't do so well in. And then there were other areas where I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like this is like our superpower. Yeah. So the one area that I did not rate myself high in, and Ariel was wise to not rate me high in as well, was in the patience category. I think when Ariel was talking earlier about the ecosystems, right? Like where every weakness has a strength, patience is not something that I'm really good at. So that's something I'm growing in. So that specific pillar, I think, is for me, one of the things that I walk away with, knowing, okay, I need to improve my patience. Just because I can move 1,000,000 miles an hour doesn't mean that that's the right way to do it. And it does, especially with somebody who takes a little bit of time to express her emotions, like that's not going to be a good thing long term. So that's the one thing. Now, where I do feel like we're very strong is in the pillar of unity. And we spoke a little bit about this earlier, but just to really hash that point down, when we approach building businesses together and helping other couples do so, the fastest way simply to build a business when you and your significant other are both entrepreneurs is to make sure that you're unified on where you're going and you're unified on the steps that it takes to get there. This is kind of like the secret, right? A lot of people hire us for marketing consulting, digital marketing, advertising, feedback, all that good stuff. And we, obviously we do that, but where our clients see the biggest results is when we are able to get them unified, lock in step on the exact goal that they want to go down. Because here's what's fascinating. I don't know if you guys have seen this study. They had 2 draft horses. I don't know if you've heard of this study, but they have 2 draft horses and they wanted to see how much weight could 2 draft horses pull compared to 1 draft horse. So they found that 1 draft horse could pull 8,000 pounds of weight. And they figured, okay, well, if you have 2 draft horses, they could pull, probably double that, right? But what they found out is that when they put 2 draft horses pulling weight, that 2 draft horses going the same direction can actually pull 3 times the weight of 1, which means that there is an exponential output for having 2 individuals going in the same direction. And as much as that works in the laws of physics, it also works in entrepreneurship. So I think that is something that's just like core to everything we do, so much so that when we teach digital advertising, we teach it using a strategy we call the Unity method. So yeah, that's very, very important to us. Yeah. And I'm so glad you guys included that in your pillars.
Sure. Yeah, synergy is important. We talk about that. And I've used that same example many times about what a Clydesdale can pull, how many tons and how much can 2. And you think it's a double. And it's, the synergy of unity is huge when you're both pulling the same direction. And I appreciate that reference.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
How about for you, Ariel? Yeah. As you look at the rest of the pillars on the list, which one stands out most to you or is most important to you?
I would say, and I kind of touched on this earlier, but I would say appreciation is the biggest one that we really notice in our relationship. And so much so that I would say one of the things that Kyle does in our relationship that I really appreciate, but it also shows me that he appreciates me is in the mornings, he will actually put my coffee cup out by the coffee maker if he gets up before me. And he's told me that's just his little trigger to remind himself in the mornings to always put me first. That's the first thing he does is put my coffee cup out. And it's little things like that show the appreciation that we have in our relationship. And again, it's like a deep respect for each other. We respect each other as, husband and wife. We respect each other as business owners. We respect our each individual gifts and strengths, and anything that is a weakness, we can actually look at each other and understand that either we complement each other or, those are opportunities for us to grow in. And we're very, very growth minded. We're very committed to growing in the same direction. And with that in mind, it's just nice to feel appreciated on a consistent basis and make sure that that's a solid foundation in our relationship that we're always coming back to.
Yeah. Every single hour, just naturally throughout the day, if you just followed us around, we would say something like, I love you, or you're pretty, or you're hot, or something just random. It's kind of funny. We make it a fun game, but at the same time, it's just part of our natural way of living.
Or hey, you crushed them.
Yeah, you killed them. Yeah, good podcast. Yeah, so we do that just so much that I think we take it for granted, but looking at it in the pillars really reflected how much we love that pillar.
Well, if appreciation is your love language and instead you're getting acts of service, that really doesn't benefit you if that's what really pushes your buttons and makes you feel good, right? So I think it's important that if that's your love language and what's important to you, that Kyle is showing you those words of appreciation and vice versa.
Absolutely.
Love to hear that. And so it kind of leads naturally. We have a concept that we call overflow thinking, and we feel that the relationship in marriage or commitment, if it's not in marriage yet or is never going to reach there. We've interviewed couples that are married, not married, or been married forever, or newlyweds. So it's kind of been the whole full spectrum. But we truly believe that our relationship is the core of our life success. And we think that the strength of our relationship spills over into other areas of our lives. So I'd love to hear from both of you all, and Kyle, maybe you'll start with on this one, is how have you seen the goodness of your relationship spill over into other areas of your life?
Well, naturally, I'll start with the business side of things. We tell people often that when they come to us with business problems, 9 times out of 10, you don't have business problems. You actually have personal problems that just so happen to show up in your business.
Yep.
So when early on in our relationship, early on in our marriage, I should say, when we had some tension that came from having competing priorities and we weren't going on date nights, we felt like we were just roommates under one household. Our business is actually completely plateaued. Like they stopped generating revenue. We were stuck at a certain amount. And no matter what we did, it felt like we couldn't like grow past where we were. And there was one day specifically where I was like, I got done having an argument with Ariel because I just wanted her to like, you don't do your business, just join my business. You could be like my assistant or something like that, which was not a smart idea. And this whole time, I just wanted her to be my assistant. She had her own business venture that she was growing. And it was very clear that she did not want to just, be in the shadows of Kyle's success, which I had to learn the hard way. So I remember though, when all of this shifted, I was in a guest room by myself, praying out to God, trying to figure out, okay, how do we like fix this weird competition, this tension? I married this person, but our romance doesn't even exist. Like, what do I do? And I remember like praying to God and then looking on social media, getting on my phone and seeing a Facebook Live video that Ariel was doing and just seeing all the comments underneath all of the people that she was helping saying, oh my gosh, Ariel, thank you so much for sharing this. You've changed my life. And that's like when it clicked to me. Like if I'm going to impede on Ariel's dreams and that's the thing that's hurting our relationship, what if I just came to her and I supported her and I said, hey, you know what? I recognize your talents. I recognize your gifts. Let's figure out a way to make both your dreams and my dreams a reality. I support you. I'm not going to try to force you into doing anything that you don't want to do anymore. Let's figure out how to make this work together. Yeah. And wouldn't you know it, once we came to that conclusion as a couple, you want to tell them what happened?
Yeah. So I went from having a few clients to having 25 clients really, really quickly. And honestly, the biggest thing for me was it felt like a weight was lifted. And that was because there was this friction in our relationship for so long that I ended up from a mentality standpoint, almost kind of hitting the brake in my business. Subconsciously, I didn't realize I was doing this, but like hitting the brake because I was like, well, if I hit the gas in my business, what is that going to do to our relationship if we're already struggling and my business is this size? You know what I mean? It's a smaller size. And so for me, it felt like a weight was lifted. And not only did my revenue increase, my client base increase, but in addition to that, I was also like able to feel supported and not have that friction in our relationship. And it showed up in other ways too. I mean, we lost weight. So many things happened because it felt like there was actual support rather than competition.
So when we put the relationship first, and that was the foundation, everything else just kind of builds off of that. We got healthier. Our businesses just went through the plateau. They exploded and we felt more alive than ever before, which I think that's really what everybody's watching is looking for. You want to have vibrancy. You want to have aliveness and energy in your relationship and throughout every area of your life. And when the relationship component is ignored, it's very hard to succeed in any other area.
Yeah.
That's great. And I love what I love, Kyle, about what you and Ariel each shared about that overflow thinking is that you each helped enable the other one to achieve their own hopes and dreams. And Kyle, you talk about, I had a dream and why couldn't she just support my dream? Right. I think that's what I heard you saying. You said, as soon as I understood, man, you heard the knock and the call saying, you can support her in achieving her dream. And as soon as that happened, a lot of weight was lifted off her, it was lifted off you. And it's so important for couples to dream together and share life dreams about whether it's business or whether it's personal or whatever it is. But you have to kind of wonder and share and be aspirational. And then it's your job. You talked about it earlier, Kyle. I think the word you say is, how can I best support her in achieving her success? Right. And if each spouse was really prioritizing the other one and asking that question and then stepping into that for their partner, then you're both unlimited in success and happiness and joy. And, you talk about that overflow thinking. It affects every area of your life. You said, gosh, we lost weight, we did this, we did that. So you can't have progress in one area that doesn't lead to the progress in the other. And that's a beautiful example of overflow thinking. So I appreciate you both for sharing that.
Yeah, this is great stuff for our listeners because there are so many people that are in the same situation that you both are in. They may be doing business together. They may just be working under the same roof together, but supporting each other is so freeing to each other as well. And I think that's what really helps make us move forward in a very happy and productive way. Yeah. So, all right. If you could go back, Kyle, to your unmarried self and give yourself one piece of advice, what would that piece of advice be?
I would say that commitment is freedom, not restriction. Because when my unmarried self just got off tour in a rock band, I was a very popular young kid. I wasn't the most popular, but I was pretty popular. I played in bands. I had a lot of talent, had a lot of charisma, and therefore I had a lot of female friends. Let's just say that. And at the time, I thought like I didn't want to limit my experience of this life. And I think you can fill in the blanks with what young teenage Kyle was thinking at that time. And at the time, the idea of like settling down and committing to being with one woman, I knew I wanted to do it. It felt like a nice aspirational thing to possibly dream for, but I didn't necessarily know how I could actually do it. If I could go back and tell that person anything, I would say, listen, your commitment to this woman who deserves 100% of your commitment is going to be the best decision you've ever made, because unlike all of the other options that are just essentially mirages of what could be just the grass on the greener grass that's on the other side of the fence, all of that is nothing but a mirage and an illusion, where if you can commit to this one woman, you actually have more freedom in every other life that you could ever possibly imagine. Ariel, and I can say this, I would say this literally anywhere, but I'll say it here as well. Ariel is someone who has actively helped me improve in every single area of my life. So I would just let him know, hey, it's worth it.
Yeah, I hear you saying, just get rid of that fear.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right.
Because there are a lot of guys out there like you feeling the same exact way. And look what you would have missed out on.
Exactly.
That's right.
100%. Oh yeah. And I think about that regularly. I'm always like, thank God. Thank God Ariel came into my life, and thank God, I believe even with my faith that God has changed my heart to really, really care and pour my love into this woman who has given me everything in return.
Yeah, and you're rewarded for that. So,
absolutely.
Ariel, how about you? If you could go back to your unmarried self, what one piece of advice would you say?
Yeah. So I want to say it's something like commitment is freedom, but from a slightly different lens. The lens in which I viewed a committed relationship was more so that they just didn't exist. And so for me, it was like, if I commit to somebody, they won't commit back to me. And that's going to like weigh me down emotionally. It's going to weigh me down in so many different ways that I'm not going to be able to pursue the other things that I'm interested in pursuing. So for me, it was, again, just a slightly different take on it, that there actually is somebody who can commit to you in the same way that you can commit to them. And with that in mind, they're also going to, you can be with somebody that can grow with you and not cause you to just grow apart, or not cause you to separate from your other passions or from your other things that you want to do. For me, I always was a very driven person. I always wanted to accomplish a lot of things. And I saw in my family how, the committed relationship was what caused division, and it's what caused one person to essentially sacrifice their desires, sacrifice their calling, sacrifice their passions in order to concede to the other person and make the other person happy. So I don't know if commitment is freedom is the right way to put it, but just that you can find somebody who will allow you to grow and flourish, and who can commit to you in the same way that you would commit to them.
Sure. And you don't have to have concessions.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. We like to say for us, we don't necessarily believe in like sacrifice and compromise. Like we think, obviously this can be taken, it's very nuanced, because it can be taken one way. Of course, there's, you don't want to come to a relationship with an ego and believe that it's your way or the highway. But at the same time, we don't believe that we have to diminish what we each want in order to make the other person happy. So we don't really believe in that traditional sense of compromise. We just believe in how can we communicate this and find something that actually works for us, and we both win versus somebody winning and somebody losing.
Right. Yeah. The idea, before you're married, it's I and you. And once you get married, it's us. And if it wins for us, it wins for the marriage, it wins for both of you. So that is one thing I think people have a hard time letting go of win-lose. But win-lose it doesn't work in a marriage, because there is no such thing as someone being advantaged while someone else is disadvantaged in the relationship. And so I love the us. And it is about the us and about unity. Those two things go hand in hand, and you guys are a beautiful example of that. And you've been so generous with your time and your responses today and being open books. We appreciate that. And if people want to learn more about you, about Kyle and Ariel and couplepreneurship, where do they go? Where can they find you?
Yeah. So the first place is Instagram. That's where we're pretty active. I believe that's where we connected with you guys, actually. So, it's Instagram.com, and our handle is Couplepreneurs_official. So that's Instagram. And then additionally, we also have a Facebook group for entrepreneur couples. So if you're somebody who, if you're listening and you and your spouse are both entrepreneurs, whether you're in business together or you each have separate businesses, or you are, one of you has a business and you want to join forces with the other person, we have a group called Successful Couples in Business. So you can just go into the Facebook search bar, search for Successful Couples in Business, and our Facebook group should pop up.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time, your candor, and sharing with us today. It's been so fun to get to know a little bit more about you guys.
Yeah, kudos to you both for showing us how to do life and business together in such a meaningful way.
We look forward to sharing the episode, and we hope to connect with you guys real soon.
Yeah,
Take care.
You for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all we've got for this episode of the Kickass Couples Podcast. If you like the content of this show, you'll love Matthew's newly released book, Kickass Husband, Winning at Life, Marriage, and Sex. To receive a digital mini book of quotes and images from the book, all you have to do is rate this show and leave a review in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you tune in to listen. Then email us a screenshot of your review at podcast@kickasscouplespodcast.com, and we'll get it over to you right away. Until next time, remember, happily ever after doesn't just happen, it's on purpose.